Chapter 1, Part 1. Before I knew her name. I used to think university would change everything. New people, new experiences, a fresh start. That was what everyone said anyway, but after months of walking through the same crowded hallways and sitting through endless lectures, everything had started feeling painfully familiar, predictable. Most days I kept to myself. It was easier that way. Easier to disappear into routines than risk being noticed too much. The only things I truly liked about campus were the quiet corners, the library during rainy afternoons, the soft hum of conversations in distant classrooms, and the way the sunset painted the architecture buildings in shades of gold and pink. Sometimes I wondered if I was waiting for something, or maybe someone. I just didn't expect that feeling to become real. It happened on a Thursday morning, a day that had started like every other ordinary day in my life, until she walked in. The lecture hall had been louder than usual that morning. Conversations overlapped from every direction, mixing with the sounds of bags dropping onto chairs and tired students complaining about deadlines. I sat near the window like always, quietly tracing patterns against the edge of my notebook while waiting for the lecture to begin. The architecture building always looked beautiful in the mornings. Sunlight spilled through the tall glass windows, casting soft shades of gold across the room. It should have felt peaceful, but something about that morning felt different. I just didn't know why yet. Then the doors opened. The room fell silent almost instantly. Not completely, just enough for everyone to notice. I looked up without thinking. And that was the moment I saw her for the first time. Scarlet Phoenix. Even before I knew her name, there was something about her presence that made the entire room feel smaller. She walked with calm confidence, dressed in black so effortlessly it almost looked intimidating, sharp, elegant, untouchable, the kind of woman people moved aside for without being asked. She barely looked at anyone as she entered, her expression unreadable and distant. Everyone else seemed nervous around her, but I couldn't stop staring. Not because she was beautiful, although she was. It was something else, something colder, like she had spent a long time building walls no one else could reach, and for some reason, I suddenly wanted to know what existed behind them. "Good morning," she said calmly. Her voice wasn't loud, yet the entire lecture hall fell silent around it. There was something unsettling about the way she carried herself. Composed, controlled, almost impossible to read. Like someone who had spent years mastering the art of hiding every emotion behind perfectly built walls. "For those of you who don't know me," she continued, her gaze moving briefly across the room, "I'm Scarlet Phoenix." The reaction was immediate. Quiet whispers spread through the lecture hall almost instantly. I heard someone behind me mutter under their breath. "Wait, the Scarlet Phoenix?" Another voice answered softly. "She owns Phoenix Architecture. I heard she's impossible to impress." But Scarlet didn't react to any of it. She stood at the front of the room with effortless confidence, completely untouched by the attention surrounding her. Everyone else looked nervous, intimidated. I probably should have been too. But instead, I found myself studying the small details about her without meaning to. The sharp elegance in the way she dressed, the calm expression she never seemed to lose, the quiet loneliness hidden somewhere behind her eyes. And then it happened. Her gaze lifted again, slowly scanning the room. For a second, it passed over everyone else. Then it stopped on me. My breath caught so suddenly it almost embarrassed me. Neither of us looked away immediately. The moment only lasted a few seconds, maybe less. But somehow, it felt like something had shifted. "Architecture," Scarlett said as she turned toward the large screen behind her, "is more than designing buildings." The presentation changed with a quiet click, revealing the image of a modern structure washed in soft evening light. "People think architecture is only about beauty," she continued, "but the spaces we create influence emotions, memory, even the way people connect with one another." The room stayed unusually quiet. Nobody wanted to interrupt her. "A well-designed space can make someone feel safe," she said calmly. "Understood, sometimes even less alone. Something about the way she said it felt strangely personal, like the words meant more to her than she intended them to. I lowered my eyes to my notebook, pretending to write something down even though my thoughts were nowhere near the lecture anymore. My attention kept drifting back to her, to Scarlet Phoenix. She moved through the room with quiet confidence, speaking with the kind of certainty that made everyone listen without question. But beneath all of that control, I kept sensing something colder, not cruel, just distant, like she had taught herself to keep people at arm's length long before anyone had the chance to get close. And somehow that made her feel even more impossible to look away from. You. The single word snapped me out of my thoughts instantly. My heart nearly stopped when I realized Scarlet was looking directly at me. "What do you think makes a space memorable?" she asked. Every pair of eyes in the lecture hall shifted toward me so fast it made my stomach tighten. I wasn't used to attention, especially not from someone like her. For a moment, I considered pretending I hadn't heard the question at all. But something in Scarlet's expression stopped me. She wasn't looking at me with impatience or judgment. She looked curious. I swallowed softly before answering. "I think people remember places because of how they felt there." The room stayed silent. Scarlet didn't say anything immediately. She simply held my gaze for a second longer than necessary. Then, almost impossibly, I noticed the faintest change in her expression. Not a smile, not completely, but something softer than before. The silence that followed felt strangely intimate, like the rest of the lecture hall had faded into the background without either of us noticing. Scarlet's gaze remained on me for another second before she finally looked away. "Exactly," she said quietly. The single word shouldn't have affected me as much as it did, but hearing approval in her voice, even something so small, sent warmth rushing through me before I could stop it. I immediately lowered my eyes back to my notebook, pretending to focus on writing while trying to ignore how fast my heart had started beating. The lecture continued, but I barely absorbed any of it after that. Every now and then I caught myself glancing toward the front of the room without meaning to. And somehow, every time I looked up, it felt like Scarlet already knew. Outside, rain had started falling softly against the tall windows of the architecture building. The gray afternoon light wrapped the lecture hall in a quiet atmosphere that felt almost dreamlike. Most students looked exhausted, already counting the minutes until the lecture ended. But Scarlet remained completely composed, calm, elegant, untouchable. At least that was how she appeared to everyone else. Because the more I watched her, the more I noticed the smaller things people overlooked. The slight pause before she answered certain questions, the way her expression softened when discussing architecture like it truly meant something to her. The loneliness hidden carefully beneath all that control. It made her feel human. And somehow that felt far more dangerous than her coldness ever could. "That concludes today's guest lecture," Scarlet said eventually, her calm voice pulling me from my thoughts once again. "Thank you for your time." The room instantly filled with movement and conversation as students began gathering their belongings. Chairs scraped against the floor while voices rose around me in excitement. Everyone suddenly seemed desperate to talk about Scarlet Phoenix.